Hi, my name is Dion. Welcome to Ascension Parish Library's Recollections of Donaldsonville with more memories from Cy Tortorich. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to interview Cy Tortorich and his wife, Mrs. Marie Tortorich, today and learn some more memories about Donaldsonville. Thank you so much for joining us. Cy, tell us about the blackouts in Donaldsonville.
Thank you. I remember these as a very, very young boy. It was sort of amazing to hear the people talk about and could actually view and see these things. World War II was going on when I was very young. I was in the 40s, 41, 42, whatever. I was 3 years old, and we lived in a what they would call a shotgun house. The reason it was called that was because there was one door in the front and one door in the back, and a room was divided with a door, and if you took a gun and you shot it through the front door, the bullet would come out the back door. Well, anyway, I lived on what is now Highway 308 in Donaldsonville, East Bayou Road. It was a dirt and gravel road when I was a kid, when I was a young boy. And there were just farmers that were in the area that all had strips of land, and they were, I think about 100% were Italian farmers who had purchased the property from the bank. When the banks went broke, they divided the plantation, which is St. Elizabeth Plantation, into strips of land, and they were in here from Italy and whatever, and they did their own stuff. But anyway, we lived in that setting on the Bayou Road. It was the Bayou Road because of Bayou Lafourche being in the front and going. Now,
I want to ask you about the survey team for the Sunshine Bridge. Tell us about that.
Okay, I think I kind of went off a little bit. Let me tell you about a little bit more about the blackouts,
Okay.
and then we'll go into that,
Okay.
if you don't mind. I remember as a kid that a gentleman would come in his Model A Ford with his lights out at night, trying to see as best he could the road. Why was all the lights out? They were afraid that German aircraft would come and bomb cities. Of course, New Orleans was probably the one of the major places where there were blackouts. We had some lighting, light bulbs or lamps, kerosene lamps, and that all had to be out. It had to be totally black. And if it wasn't, the person that came around to check would be sure that you put out your lights. And I think it was mostly because during the war of being afraid of German aircraft coming over from the Gulf, coming over South Louisiana and detecting. Now, you wanted to know about the...
Well, let's do the survey team for the Sunshine Bridge. Were you on the survey team?
Yes. There was the Sunshine Bridge was really criticized as something that was started in the cane field and ended in the cane field. And where would it go? Cane field to cane field. That was it. There were only a few roads here. It was the River Road on the east and west side of the river, and a road maybe going north to White Castle, The way people crossed the Mississippi River was in Donaldsonville on LaSarge Street, going to the ferry. And there was a ferry that would run every half hour to cross people and cars across the river to the little community of Darrow, Louisiana, that's on the east side of the river. And that's the way it was. And it's now Highway 22, and you would go to Burnside, make a left, and you would go to Gonzales. And of course, Huey Long did the airline highway at that time in Gonzales. I mean, from Baton Rouge to New Orleans, there was a 4-lane. And this is really something else. They have a 4-lane highway connecting Baton Rouge and New Orleans. So people crossed the ferry. Well, in 1956, a survey was started to see if we needed a bridge across the river. And the surveyor was from New York. He came to the high schools, Ascension Catholic, or Catholic High, and Donaldsonville High, and they recruited junior and senior students that they would give maybe $1.50 or $2 an hour, which was a lot of money, to stop people on a 24-hour basis in the middle of the night to ask them where they were going and where they were coming from, to see there would be enough cars and so on and so forth to have a bridge across the Mississippi River. Wow. Some people were against the bridge, said it was a waste of money. Some wanted the bridge. Where do we put it? They looked north of Donaldsonville, between Donaldsonville and White Castle, around the area we call Modest. And on the east side of the river, that would have come out at around Geismar. And they looked at different places for the bridge. And as the survey was done, some people did not like being stopped in the middle of the night and asked where you were going and where you were coming from, blah, blah, blah. But we did it and went to school the next morning and was so sleepy that our heads would fall on our desk, you know, because we were up all night. Yes. Counting cars. But
tell them about Mr. Falsetta.
And they would allow us to do that.
Tell them about Nikki's daddy.
Who's that?
Nicky Falsetta's daddy.
Mr. Falsetta. That's Falsetta's in Donaldsonville. And there was two Ralphs. Big Ralph Falsetta, everybody knows him. And there's another, his brother, or his cousin called, and they called him Little Ralph Falsetta. And during the war, one of the biggest shipbuilding in the United States, warships, was in Pascagoula, Mississippi. And they trained a lot of boys, young boys that age, to be welders. And they would go to Pascagoula and live and stay there to build warships. And Little Ralph was one of them, and he was a welder. And after the war, when he came back home, he started his own little welding business with his truck. And the farmers in the fields, their tractors would break, the plows would break. He would go in the fields and weld the tractor and fix it. There was another man, I don't think he was a veteran.
Bring him to the Sunshine Bridge story.
He would, Mr. Gussie Hahn, he had a welding truck. And he would go in the fields, and his truck would get all broken up, and the tractors would pull him out of the mud I remember on the side of his truck, Mr. Gussie, I've got to say this. He had, "Don't cuss, call Gus.
Yeah.
I can weld anything but the break of day and a broken heart." We'll never forget that. But anyway, that's how the welding and Little Ralph did.
Well, can you tell
What
us
he
about...
told y'all at the Sunshine Bridge,
Who was that?
Mr. Ralph, Lil Ralph.
Oh, well, getting back to Little Ralph. He passed one night about 2 o'clock in the morning. "Man, you kids, this is dangerous." He was going to La Peace oil field, which was on the river road, to work for Shell Oil Company to do a job in the middle of the night. And he says, he goes to his truck and he get about 3 pipes, pretty long. And he gave us each a pipe. He said, "If anybody threatens y'all, you just hit them with the pipe."
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Ralph. But anyway, one night a bunch of Tulane football players a Saturday night came through, and they threatened us. They were going, Mr. Mike Schexnayder was a Tulane player, and he was in the car, and he recognized us. But we told Ralph about this, and that's why he gave us the pipes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the WPA.
The Works Projects Administration was called the WPA. During that period of time, after World War II, people were in soup kitchens, they were in soup lines. If they could get a bowl of soup to eat, that was great. And you've seen pictures of the soup lines in New York and Chicago. But anyway, our President Franklin Roosevelt and the Congress decided to try to put people to work. Everybody was out of work. Didn't have a nickel, didn't have a dime. And as I understood, they paid them 50 cents a day. My father was one of those, and it was called the WPA. That's how I knew and remember that. My mother used to, fix the lunch and give people and bring them. They worked for the government to get money so that money could get into circulation all over the country. In Tennessee, they started planting trees so they can get lumber for building.
We did in Donaldsonville.
Okay, that was the CCC camps. Mm-hmm. They were camps. That was a Civilian Conservation Corps to plant trees. And the biggest thing in that area, and it's there today, hydroelectric power plants. The Tennessee Valley Authority,
Bring it to Donaldsonville.
where they used the Tennessee River to create that. So this is that thing. And
Well, tell us about the post office and the sewer system.
that's correct. Okay. In Donaldsonville, the WPA hired people, paid them 50 cents a day. Some of the streets in Donaldsonville now, today, 80-something years or whatever, you can walk on them, and they're cement streets. The area around the post office is an example. Still there today, never been repaired, no potholes, curb and gutter done by hand by workers crawling on their knees over by the Ascension graveyard by where the Ascension Catholic School is right now, the gym, is cemented streets. That was done during the WPA. So people worked very hard with their hands, and they got 50 cents a day. Later on, the road going to White Castle going north is now Highway 1, and it followed the railroad track. The railroad was here already. It had been done earlier from New Orleans to Shreveport and into Texas. The only way to go north in Donaldsonville was the River Road, which was to White Castle. I think it was 16 miles. And by putting a road following the railroad track to White Castle, it would be 10 miles. And that was built, my father worked on that. The contractor I think they're still in business today, Barber Brothers.
Underpass, the
And
underpasses.
they did it with horses and mules and road graders.
And what about the underpasses?
Donaldsonville, if you would know, from New Orleans to wherever, the River Bayou, the WPA did the underpasses. And if you go to the one right here on 308 and you look on the side, you'll see 1938. Donaldsonville was one of the oldest cities in the state of Louisiana, 1803. The oldest, as you know, is Natchitoches, Louisiana, and Donaldsonville. And of course, you know, the legislature met here twice. It was the seat of government. But anyway, there are 3 underpasses under the railroad where we don't have to stop, like in White Castle and Plaquemine, where you have the arms that got to go down and the horn of the train blows all the way through those cities. Not Donaldsonville. So that was built in those days. And we have one on St. Patrick Street, one now on the bayou, 308, and one right across the bayou on Highway 1. Those were really something to have at that time, you know, in this town.
Wow. Well, let's talk about the building of Ascension Catholic High School, Ascension Catholic School.
The Daughters of Charity, the Ursulines before them, came to New Orleans in a very, very early age. And there were religious groups that came to teach young children, and of course, Catholic children to be Catholics and
we
church.
had the Daughters of Charity.
That we call them here in Donaldsonville was from Missouri.
We had the Daughters of Charity, not the Ursulines.
No, it wasn't the Ursulines. The Ursulines, I just said they were in New Orleans.
That's correct.
They were another group.
The Daughters of
The
Charity.
Daughters of Charity came from Missouri.
Uh-huh.
And we went there, Maria and I. As you can see, she's talking to me some. She ought to be here too. And maybe we can get her here before this thing is over with. And the Daughters of Charity started the convent in Donaldsonville before the Civil War. That convent is still standing.
Wow.
In fact, it's just been redone, repaired. The sisters lived there, and they had a school there. And they were the Daughters of Charity, and they were not Perryville, Missouri. What was it?
They actually are, the mother house is in St. Charles, Missouri.
St. Charles, Missouri, that's right. And we have visited there. And lo and behold, when we went there years ago, some of the nuns that taught her was there.
Really?
Yeah. And so they taught the girl division. Everyone knows of Sister Marie in this community, and we were both in her class in the first grade in that little one-room shack. But the other one was the Brothers of the Sacred Heart. They came from Metuchen, New Jersey, and they were some tough characters. I've got to say that. They didn't mind slapping us or whipping us or beating us if we did just a little bit something wrong.
That sounds like the brothers. My dad had the same experience with the brothers he had.
Right. But you can't do that today.
No.
Or you would be in court and in jail.
Right.
But back then, the brothers, and I went to the brothers' school. Now, there was a big house right in the back of the Catholic Church today where the brothers lived, and there were some classrooms there, and there were 3 classrooms over to the side by the canal, and that's where we went to school. We went to the sister school from kindergarten to the 5th grade, and then the girls stayed there, but the boys then went to the brothers' school in the 6th grade, and that was bad. The building burned, went down, they had it destroyed, and people in this town started talking about building a Catholic school, boys and girls division. And this rumor started around 1954, 55. Because I do remember in 56, when I was working across the street there at the Ford place, Mr. Ewing, and I mentioned that him in my other thing, he and other people in this town, and he coached for free at Ascension Catholic. Because he was from from Nebraska, as you know, and he played football at LSU in the middle 20s. Well, anyway, another guy that came here as a coach at the high school, Mr. Floyd Boutte. And Mr. Boutte was from Lutcher. These people were highly regarded. I mean, the children that they taught and grew into adults thought they were gods, you know?
Wow.
And that's the way it was back then.
Wow.
The stadium today at the high school is Floyd Boutte Stadium. And the thing about these schools was that they had bake sales, cake sales, dinners. They collect anything you can. There was tickets sold. Bisso, who's a big New Orleans, Mr. Bisso, had ferries and ships and all that, had 2 boats here in Donaldsonville. The George Prince and the Ali K. Wow. The George Prince sunk later years in St. James Parish. But anyway, the big thing was to have a big band on these boats on a Saturday night. You sell tickets, you get your date. Of course, everybody was dressed proper, shirt and tie, bow tie. And you would have river cruises right here in Donaldsonville.
That's nice.
On these boats, and to collect money for the school. They did everything to get it. And I think it projected that it was going to be $200,000, which was a lot of money at that time.
Tell them who built the school.
The schools were built, and they were, these guys worked very cheap. It was 3 brothers. The Lanois from Donaldsonville. There was one named Mr. Khaki Lanois. The other one they called Jumbo Lanois. Miss Amelia Lanois, who had a store in Donaldsonville, a shoe store. That was her husband. She lived by us. And the other one was Benny, Mr. Benny Lanois. They were the contractors for the school, and they said they could build it. Those 3 brothers, the Lanois brothers, built Ascension Catholic School at gym, and we were the first class to graduate in that gym in 1956. And boy, it was really something else. The school is still being used today.
Still today, yes.
It's still there. And just to think, to have a lunchroom.
Yes.
There were hot meals for us then.
Yes.
We used to bring our sandwiches and peanut butter and jelly and bologna.
Yeah, I remember
And in a little box.
Yes.
And, but then now we had a lunchroom. And I tell you, that was really something else. That was really something else to have that.
That sounds great. Well, can you tell us about the school board office?
Yes, we got to say the school board. Of course, Maria and I taught 35 and 36 years each in the school system in Ascension.
That's a long time.
The new office right now is on Pettyvan Street. No, it's Tebow Drive. It was Pettyvan, the Tebows. And it was built in '66, but we'll get back. I don't want to get ahead. I can remember way back when I was a boy, and there was a beautiful elementary school on Railroad Avenue, right across from where A.S. Hardware is today. Oh, it's a big town park now. It's beautiful. You sit there and you can see the courthouse and things. They have there 2 parks in Donaldsonville that's nice. That one and the one on the river on Mississippi Street, Crescent Park. And of course you have the Frank Sotil Pavilion,
Yes.
where a lot of activity goes on. But anyway, I remember the name of the first superintendent was Mr. Larry Babin. And he was superintendent of schools in Ascension Parish. At that time, you had, you had Donaldsonville High School. On the east side of the river, you had Dutchtown, Gonzales, and Sanama. And the school board office was in that school on Railroad Avenue. It was like a 3-story, but it was a basement. And the school board office was in that basement.
I want to
interject
interject
the second floor and the
something
third
here.
floor, and she taught there.
Can I interject?
Sure.
I was hired by the Ascension Parish School Board.
Why don't you come here? Bring a chair for her, please.
Go ahead, Marie.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you can be heard.
Yeah.
I was hired by the Ascension Parish School Board in the National Food Store by Mr. Gordon Webb in 1961.
Wow.
That would not happen today. Mr. Webb saw me. He said, "Young lady, don't you have a teaching degree?" I said, "Yes, sir, I do." "Would you report to work on Monday morning?"
Wow.
"Yes, sir, I will." And I signed my papers weeks later. I had worked for weeks before I went in and signed papers.
Degree teachers were hard to find.
It was hard to find degree teachers.
Nichols was starting to produce, Nichols State University, teachers with degrees, before you had substitute teachers. And he was a teacher at home with 2 young children that had a degree, and she should have been in the classroom.
Yes.
But anyway, it's the same way they hired me from the library. I told you another thing that I was waiting for the library, and Mr. Webb, the same superintendent, we met at a filling station. And I was gassing up the bookmobile. He said, "Son, don't you have a degree?" I said, "Yes, sir, in social sciences." And he said, "What are you doing driving this bookmobile?" I said, "Well, I also have a library degree." I said, and they started this library as a project from LSU in every parish in the state. This was one of the first. Miss Cazayu was the librarian, and Miss Adams. And but anyway, he hired me at the gas station. I said, "What am I gonna do with this bookmobile?" He said, "Well, drive it to the library and give the librarian the keys." I said, "Okay." He said, You be awake tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. And he had me in the classroom. And that's how it happened.
That's how it started.
That I started teaching school.
Yes.
But this library has always been a piece of my heart,
Yes.
knowing that I was
Yes.
at the beginning when it started.
Right.
And it was in a little building across from the movie theater that's still there. And then later on, it was moved across from where the Grapevine is now.
Uh-huh.
It used to be the Tavern Bar.
Uh-huh.
And it was there in that building for a long time. But that's the library. I think we should mention the library.
Yes, yes. Well, so I want to ask you some questions about the ice house. What can you tell us about the ice house?
Back then, that was very, very important. As I mentioned, there were a lot of Italian farmers on the bayou where I lived, and they all had their strips of land, 110 feet wide. The Marcellos, the Sotiles, the Perfidas, on and on and on. My grandfather. And they would raise crops to be shipped. They would truck farm their crops to New Orleans in one day and put the tailgate down. And everybody knows about the French market, the French Quarter. The people from Washington Parish would come with watermelon, living on the state, and that's where they would sell their produce at the French market in New Orleans. They would finish, put the tailgate up, drive back to their hometown, and go another day. Well, there were others that raised bulk, a lot of stuff. And one of the biggest things was shallots. You know what that is? It's a little green onion. And there were fields of shallots here. Tomatoes, whatever, mustard. Boy, they would pick the prettiest mustard and bunch it and tie it and wash it. Beautiful. I'm talking about these box cars you see on a railroad track. And the road spur is still there by the ice house that's still what we call back of town. So on the other side of the tracks. That's where she was from.
Say it with ease and a smile.
She's answering me now. For the people that don't see her, that's my wife over there. And she's leading me on. She doesn't want to get on camera. But anyway, her parents ran the ice house. There were ice houses all over. New Orleans, Lutcher, Donaldsonville, White Castle, Blackman, Thibodeau, with real spurs, because you needed fresh fruit, and not more fruit, but you needed vegetables and stuff like that was very fresh, like you just picked them out of the field. But it would take 2 to 3 days to ship this stuff to Chicago, St. Louis, Tallahassee, New York. They would do it all over the country. From they would put layers of these fresh vegetables in one of, I'm calling them a box car. That's a train car. And they would put it by the ice house, and they made a lot of ice. And you know what a snowball is? This thing would grind and shoot the ice on the layer of vegetables. When there was enough ice there, they would pack another layer of vegetables, shoot the ice, and another layer of vegetables. Now you can imagine, by the time they got to, let's say, St. Louis, these cars were dripping water all the way. But it did keep the vegetables nice, and people in the northern part of our country could enjoy what we were raising here in Louisiana. And I wanted to mention that, not to say that we had ice boxes. We had to keep the milk from the cows cool. And you would go get your block of ice, about a 25-pound block every night, and bring it home, put it in the ice box, no electricity, and keep your milk cold and your meat and stuff like that. And that's what I referred to earlier, my daddy. He would go get a block of ice every night.
Yes.
And I would ride on the handlebar of the bike and go down 2nd Street singing my heart out. It was, at that time, it was a black community. And we were all friendly with everyone there.
Yes.
And they would wait for me to come by with my daddy to sing. And at that time, I liked Roy Rogers and Gene Autry. And I'm back in the saddle again. And I would be singing songs like this. And, you know, I remember that quite vividly when every night we had to go get the ice.
Wow. Well, let's talk about the Fry brothers. Who were they?
That was a big meat packing company here in Donaldsonville. Fry, Mr. Lou Fry. A lot of people worked there. In fact, Lala Ruggiero, the mayor of Donaldsonville, was a meat cutter there. His brother, George Ruggiero was there. He later had their own little butcher shops and stuff like that. Guy that had truck drivers, Bean Latina. Remember I used to go with him. Fry Brothers supplied LSU with a truckload of Frankfurters on Saturday for a game. And we would bring a load of Frankfurters for hot dogs to the LSU stadium. They packed meat. They sold meat, had meat markets. Another one there, and I shouldn't forget his name, was my daughter-in-law's father, Mr. Walter Rushing. He was a meat cutter there too. But this plant was right on a railroad track on Division Street. It was a huge plant, kind of 2 blocks down from the First and Last Chance that's been there for 100 years.
Wow.
Everybody knew where the Chance is. It was founded by 2 Italian fellas, the Savoyas and Ruggierios. And that's where Fry Brothers was. And they would deliver meat throughout South Louisiana by truck. But that was with the meat packing industry from Donaldsonville.
Let's talk about the car dealerships. How many car dealerships did they have in Donaldsonville at one time?
We counted at one time. Somebody said 12, 15. I could count about 10 car dealerships in Donaldsonville. There was Ford right here, across the street from the library where I worked. Right across the street from there, Lazard, was Chevrolet. That was T-Bow Motor Company. Right down the street from that, another block, was B. Lemon and Brothers.
Wow.
That's still there.
Oldsmobile.
Right down from there was Capone Pontiac.
Wow.
It was there. We had, and I told her the other day, there's a little street in town, got one house on it. And it's called Vickers. Vickers. There was Vickers Buick, was on Railroad Avenue, right there across from where the Babin store was, J.C. Babin. There was, down the bayou was Nash. It was a Nash car, Crosley, Castro Motors was there. And
Matasser.
Roy Ennis, Mr. Roy Ennis had Chrysler Plymouth.
Wow.
Mr. C.J. Booster Airbear had Dodge Plymouth. I don't know, maybe I mentioned about,
The
What about
Mata-
Matasser?
huh?
What about Matasser? Did he-
Matasser.
Yeah, well, I was about to say, I hope I don't forget anybody. But Matasser was on Railroad Avenue, right next to where the school was, and they sold Studebaker.
Uh-huh.
And later they got Kaiser Frazer. You might have never heard of these cars.
I haven't.
They were produced after World War II. People were car hungry after World War II. You couldn't get a car. You had to order one. It might take 3 months to get it in.
Wow.
A Plymouth or whatever.
So it sounds like almost every major car dealership, every major car was in Donaldson.
We're here in Donaldsonville. I was almost about to forget Matasser, but let me see. I hope I didn't forget any. But there was, you know.
Let's talk
That's
about
about it.
let's talk about the Grand Theater.
Everybody went to the Grand Theater. Why they tore some of these buildings down in Donaldsonville, I don't know why. Right where this library is was, of course, the Bel Air bar and the club bar. And right next door was a beautiful hotel, Hotel Donaldson.
Go back to the Grand.
Huh?
Go back to the Grand
The
Theater.
Grand was located over by down Railroad Avenue from Lemon Store. There were businesses there, and I want to talk about the businesses too. Also, the Grand Theater was run by Mr. Max Quintmore and Mr. Abear. What was Mr. Abear's first name?
I don't remember.
But it was Abear. And they got the latest movies. And everybody, man, we saw Doris Day.
Yeah.
We saw Betty Grable.
The Three Stooges.
The matinee on Saturdays was 9 cents.
Wow.
That's the one I used to go to.
Uh-huh.
And my mama would give me 15 cents if she could afford it, because I'd buy me a bag of popcorn. And I had a penny left over. And after the movie, I was walking down the street, I'd stop at Ferris and get me a bubble gum for a penny.
Tell
But
them
anyway,
about the popcorn.
What about the popcorn? What about the popcorn?
Okay, we had something in Downsville that I never had anywhere else, any other theater. It was sweet popcorn. And boy, it was delicious. And you went there and you got your popcorn, and look, the matinee, you would see the Durango Kid, Roy Rogers, Gene Autry, Hopalong Cassidy. Those are the early Western movies. And then they would have what we call the Continue. You know what that was? It was about a little 5 or 10 minute thing that they would show. And at the end, a man would be falling off a cliff, and they cut it. But you had to go back the next week to see what happened to him. And he would catch onto a branch. He wouldn't fall. And then the comedy was the Three Stooges and Our Gang. Things like that, if you can remember.
Yeah, I remember the Three Stooges. I used to watch it when it was on TV. And it was old then, you know.
Yes. But the Stooges was something else. Yeah. I mean, they would bang a fried pan over the other one's head and all that kind of stuff. But it was a lot of joy for young kids like us, and I was 9, 10 years old. Man, we look forward to Saturday going to the movie. But Donaldsonville back then was bustling like you don't know what. on a Saturday morning. These streets were packed. People coming from the Bruley, from St. James, or you had Joe Robinson bus line, an old school bus. He would make 3 and 4 trips a day and park and let the people out, do their shopping, and in 2 hours get back on, go back to St. James. Donaldsonville was, I mean, you can't imagine the crowds that would be in the streets. Wow. You couldn't find a parking place anywhere on the street. You had Dave Block right there next to the bank. You had Gaston's suits for men. The next thing was the Army store, and then you had the Wild department store, and then Lemons. I mean, Lemons, everybody went to Lemons. That was the Walmart of the time. And down Railroad Avenue, the same thing.
Tell us about the gas stations in Donaldsonville.
Everybody said that Donaldsonville had more gas stations than anywhere else in the world. 1 pump stations. There was one right across the street here, Amical. Mm-hmm. Right on the corner by Cokie was Mr. Harry Landry. Uh-huh. He had golf. You go and you turn and go down Railroad Avenue, you had Vincent Latina, what they call him Bean. Uh-huh. Bean Latina. But at that time, you would wash 20, 25 cars on a Saturday by hand, white wall, clean the inside, change oil, change filter, whatever. They would fill it up, $5. Everything, $5, $6. Gas was 32 cents a gallon. And after Bean, you would go down the street, and on the other end was Mr. Matteo Rendazzo, and he was a distributor over where Mr. Fredericks have his station now. Then right next door to that was Booster Bear. You had on the corner, you had Mr. Daigle. Across the street, you had Vic Marcello. That was Texaco. Across the bayou, you had Harry Landry. And Mr. Harry Landry. And,
Harry Dugas.
I'm sorry, Mr. Dugas. Harry Dugas. And then you had, on this side of the street, it was Esso. On the other side of the street, it was Mr. Caballero. And by the way, I used to work for Mr. Caballero. It was a little extra job. After school, I would go there and run his station from 4 o'clock to 10 o'clock when we would close. Mr. N.J. Caballero.
So they had a lot of gas stations in Donaldsonville.
I mean, gas stations all over. Oh, I can't forget Mr. Sam Graffio. Mm-hmm. Right down Mississippi Street here, Mr. Sam Graffio had a station, and a lot of them, right.
Let's talk about the swimming pool in Donaldsonville.
Swimming pool was something big. It was a big pool. It was across from the Bell House. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Over by past Lemon. Mm-hmm. And swimming lessons would be taught there by Mr. Booty. And sometimes Mr. Falcon, Keith Falcon would be there, and other people. But children would go there and swim. Then they put the big water tank there. The swimming pool disappeared, but another one was built just as big at the La La Rogera ballpark. Mm-hmm. The block building is still there across from where the old high school was. Donaldsonville High School by the stadium. Mm-hmm. So that was the swimming pool thing in Donaldsonville.
What about the South Louisiana State Fair?
A big thing. Once a year, the state fair would come here, and on a Friday, schools were let out as far as Tangipahoa Parish. 10, 12 parishes around here: Assumption, Lafourche, Terrebonne, Iberville, you name it. And all the kids would come here in school buses. And the rides were very cheap that day for the kids. They could do the flying horses and the tilt-a-whirl and all that. On Sunday nights, there was where the ballpark is now, where the grandstand, we call it the grandstand. You have aerial shows, the Walensky's.
The Walenders.
Huh? Walenders, right. World famous all over. Would walk the high wire. Man, and you would just be in awe watching this stuff, watching them swing and letting go and catching each other. And the things they didn't do, but the Walenders. But that was right here in Donaldsonville for South Louisiana State Fair. And it stayed here a week.
Wow.
When it left, it went to Shreveport. And it was in Shreveport. But that was very, very big, right.
Tell us about the honeybee companies.
You know, there were two companies in Donaldsonville that sold their honey. And I know Bessonet honey went all over the world. It was a Bessonet Bee Company right on Highway 1. And further down was Guerin Bee Company. And their honey was on the store shelves. You know, it was good. But it was right here in Donaldsonville on my Lafourche that you had two honeybee companies there selling honey, right.
And what about Dory's? Did I'm saying it right? Dory's?
Okay, I wanted to mention businesses in Donaldsonville that was here. D.B. Doran, and the warehouse is still on Lafourche Street. The sugar industry was so big here that they would repair crushers and things there for the sugarcane industry when the season was over. My father worked for the Dorans, Mike Tortorich. And that the building is still there. It was D.B. Doran Copper and Iron Works. And it was a pretty big industry here in Donaldsonville. Because I used to remember my mom used to cook his lunch and put it in a basket on my bike, and I would ride my bike there to bring my dad his lunch, you know. But D.B. Doran was still in business a few years ago. They sold to Nadler and Plaquemine, and they're located in Assumption Parish now, even today, on Highway 1000 in Assumption Parish.
That's interesting. Is there anything else you want to talk about today, Mr. Tortorich? We've covered a lot of things. Is there something else you wanted to say today?
Well, I always go by my little book here.
Yes.
I love to read it.
Yes.
The front picture of it is the footbridge that I don't remember, but remember it and talk about it. And it was where the pumping station is now. There were no bridges across the bayou. But here I go with me again. The police jury, we needed a bridge where the, down by the hospital, where the bridge is now. And we secured some federal revenue sharing funds with the parish contributing and the city to build that bridge that's there now. And we built it, and it's very important. It's by the hospital. There was no way to get to the hospital unless you went all the way around. Now, there was the Palo Alto Bridge about 3 more miles down by you, but it wasn't a bridge for cars. It was a railroad bridge that they converted into a one-lane car bridge. But anyway, to make a little funny story, at the end, when the bridge was built, we were going to dedicate it. Sheriff Waggersback, different parish officials, and so we had the police jury meeting, and I'm the president at that time. Man, we need a name for that bridge. What is the bridge? What is the name? Somebody said, well, we're going to call it the Tortorich Bridge. Wow. Because it connects Ward 4, his ward, to Beanberg's Ward 2 on the other side of the river, up the bayou. That would be a perfect name for it, the Tortorich Bridge. Wow. Well, about to make the motion, one of the lawyers raised their hand and said, y'all can't do that. Said, well, why? Said, you can't name a bridge after living people. Oh. So a joke happened at the police jury meeting. Another one got up and said, oh no, we're naming it after Cy's grandpa and Bean's grandpa. So a lot of things we had the jury meeting, we couldn't decide and stuff like that. The bridge went on there. But we wind up after the meeting at the first and last chance to eat. And a lot of people at the meeting would come to the chance. And they were joking about the bridge. So somebody said, well, man, they can't do that. Somebody said, I'll be at the next meeting. I got a name for that bridge. Put me on the agenda. Okay. Mr. Spano was the Secretary of Treasury, John Spano. Put the place on the agenda. If you had to get on the agenda and you want to speak, you get on the agenda. So we was having a meeting, the next meeting, and everything was discussed and all that. And we were trying to solve problems of the parish, just like what's going on today. Yeah. Except, well, they had drainage problems too back then. But then the guy got up, okay, sir, you can speak. My nickname is Cy because of music.
Yes.
Mr. Berg's name is Wilbert Berg. But they called him Bean. Said, go ahead, speak your mind. Name it the Cy Bean Bridge. What he was thinking of was the Sabine River that divides Louisiana from Texas. And he said, well, there's a river by that name? He said, yeah, but it's not spelled the same. It would be Cy Bean. The bridge got christened. It was never named. It's not in the records of the Ascension Parish Police Jury. Just I guess if you go back and read the minutes of that meeting, you'll read everything that I just said.
Yes.
But everybody now calls it the Cy Bean Bridge.
Wow.
Even the city. When they have meetings and they refer to it, it's an unofficial name.
Wow.
I would have to pass on, I guess, if they want to name it a Tortorich Bridge. Yeah. But that's a little story about that bridge. Take it for what it's worth.
That's interesting.
But,
well, Cy and Miss Marie, I want to thank you all for coming today. It's been a wonderful time talking with you all. We've learned a lot more about Donaldsonville.